They told me it would be quick. Just a routine check-in. No agenda, no slides, nothing formal. After nearly 2 decades with Valeron Systems, I'd sat through too many of these to count. I knew the rhythm, or at least, I thought I did. But the second I stepped into that boardroom, something felt off. The air was too crisp, the smiles too shallow, and then I saw him. A young man in a stiff navy suit already sitting at the table. Someone I vaguely remembered from holiday parties or hallway run-ins. Always on the edge of things. Never important. Until now. That's when Mr. Thatcher, our CEO, cleared his throat, calm, almost rehearsed. Before we begin, he said, there's something we need to announce. No one looked at me. Not one damn person. Then it hit me. This is Ryan, and he'll be stepping in as head of strategy. Effective immediately. I blinked. My brain caught the math before my heart did. Ryan Thatcher. His son-in-law. 18 years. Erased in one sentence. I didn't cry, didn't argue. I just stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked out, heels clicking against marble. Louder than my silence. Because sometimes the sound of collapse doesn't roar. It whispers. I sat in my car for what must have been an hour. Engine off. Radio silent. My hands were still wrapped around the steering wheel like I might drive somewhere, anywhere, if I could just remember how to breathe. I didn't cry. I wanted to. My chest begged me to. But nothing came. Just the dull throb of humiliation pulsing through my limbs. The kind that doesn't sting right away but shows up later. Like a bruise forming beneath the skin. The sky outside had turned slate gray. Heavy with rain. Perfect, I remember thinking. Even the weather knew. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I ignored it. A minute later, it buzzed again. I stared at the screen for a while. Not out of fear. Not exactly. More like resistance. Like I wasn't ready to absorb anything else. Not after what had just happened. But curiosity. It's always louder than pride. I answered. This is Bella. A pause. Then a smooth, low voice. Bella Reynolds? Yes, I said cautiously. My name is Ethan Grant. CEO of Corvanta Holdings. That name snapped me upright. Corvanta. We had fought for market share with them for years. Battles fought through proposals. Contract bids. And corporate whispers. I'd never met Ethan personally. But the name held weight. Precision. Discipline. Ruthlessness. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. He continued. Voice calm. Measured. I was just fired. I said flatly. A beat of silence. Then. Yes. I know. I blinked. The rain outside blurred into soft ribbons across the windshield. But inside, my mind sharpened like broken glass. I've followed your work for years. He said, what you built at Valeron was extraordinary. And I want you to hear this. Great people don't disappear just because mediocre ones stop recognizing them. His words landed somewhere deep, somewhere I hadn't fortified yet. I didn't know whether to feel insulted, seen, or both. I'd like to meet you, he said, tomorrow, 10 a.m. My office. Why? I asked, more suspicious than curious now. Because the board that fired you, Ethan replied, just gave up their most valuable asset. And I don't intend to waste that. A second later, a text pinged in. His office address, downtown. 27th floor. I stared at it. And then I typed 2 words. 10 works. I didn't sleep much that night. I didn't drink. Didn't pace. I just sat on the floor of my apartment. Surrounded by boxes I never unpacked from my last move. Old files. Flash drives. Notes scribbled in coffee shops during product launches that almost fell apart until I held them together. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something worse. Wired. Awake. Sharpening. By the time I stepped into Corvanta's lobby the next morning, my heels felt steadier. I wore black. Not out of mourning. Out of intention. Ethan Grant was waiting by the glass-walled conference room. He didn't offer a smile, a handshake, or a coffee. Just a nod toward the seat across from him. No words. Just a black leather folder. This, he said, sliding it across the table, is what I want you to lead. I opened it. A strategic acquisition plan, meticulously organized, target companies, risk frameworks, migration schedules. But then I stopped cold. Valeron Systems. My company. My name was gone from the org chart. But there it was. Under acquisition pipeline. Listed as in process. You're buying them, I said, throat dry. We are, he replied, quietly. For now. Why wasn't this mentioned yesterday? Because I needed you to see the full picture first. He said, this isn't revenge, Bella. It's restoration. And I want you at the center of it. I looked at him long and hard. You want me to help you buy out the company that just humiliated me? No, he said, calm as ever. I want you to take it back. As interim CEO. The silence between us tightened like a rope. I stared at the pages. Legal terms. Transition structures. Operational audits. I'd written half these procedures 5 years ago. You've been planning this since before I was pushed out. I said quietly. I have. And the board? They don't know, Ethan said. Then, without flinching, he added, they will soon. I closed the folder but didn't push it away. My pulse slowed. I wasn't scared. I wasn't broken. I was curious. Not about the plan. About why me. Because they underestimated you, he answered, as if reading my thoughts. And I don't intend to repeat that mistake. It wasn't flattery. It was strategy. And it worked. I didn't answer Ethan right away. Not with words. Instead, I asked for 48 hours. Not because I doubted the opportunity. No. Something deeper. I needed time to remember who I was before I became invisible in my own company. Before Caleb and that suffocating boardroom stole my voice behind a silk curtain of corporate courtesy. That night, I pulled out an old external hard drive. Dusty. Scratched. Labeled in fading Sharpie. V Systems. Legacy Docs 2017. Back then, I documented everything. Not out of paranoia, but principle. I believed institutional knowledge had value. That someone should always remember the bones of the house. Not just its painted walls. As I sifted through folders, past early prototypes and pipeline strategies, something caught my eye. A clause, buried in a merger contingency draft. Clause 47B. In the event of acquisition or internal merger, any executive board member who held direct governance over intellectual property, compliance, or organizational restructuring shall retain transitional oversight authority for a minimum of 90 business days. I froze. 5 years ago, I had written that, back when we merged 2 regional partners into Valeron's parent structure. I'd fought tooth and nail to keep the clause in, to protect continuity. I told the legal team. To protect the soul of the company. I told myself. And no one had ever removed it. Legally, if Corvanta acquired Valeron, I wouldn't just return. I'd return with teeth, with binding oversight across every transition plan. Department reshuffle, and strategic decision. I leaned back, staring at the screen, breath slow and deliberate. They erased my title, but not my fingerprints. The next morning, I didn't tell Ethan. Not yet. Power, when wielded too early, becomes noise. I needed silence. Strategy. Instead, I booked a closed-door session with Corvanta's legal team and confirmed that yes, Clause 47B was still binding. Embedded deep within Valeron's own acquisition protocols. By noon, I was back in a temporary office on the 26th floor, overlooking the exact building I'd been ejected from. This time, not as an employee. Not yet as CEO. But as a shadow. And I had work to do. First, I made a quiet lunch call to Naomi Park, our former product director. She'd moved to Singapore after a brutal downsizing 2 years ago. She picked up halfway through the second ring. Are you calling to gossip? Warn me, or recruit me? She asked without skipping a beat. Maybe all three. Naomi laughed, sharp, knowing. Then I'm listening. By evening, I'd sent messages. Short, deliberate, to 3 more. Marcus Ellison, the old infrastructure lead, Lena Zhao, supply ops, and Aria Costa, the quiet genius behind our compliance frameworks. Each message ended the same way. It's time, and I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because the house we built deserves better tenants. 3 days later, Ethan summoned me again. This time, no folder, just a small envelope. Inside, a confidential dossier marked Internal Leadership Risk, Post-Acquisition Review. I flipped it open and my eyes stopped cold. Caleb Thatcher, current head of strategy, flagged, operational instability. Reputational risk. Oh, he was still there. Still clinging to the title gifted to him with a handshake and a last name. Still unaware of the quiet storm crawling toward him. I flipped the page. Clause 47B Authority. Bella Reynolds. Activation pending board transfer. They'd found it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You still want to do this quietly? I closed the folder. Quiet isn't weakness, I said. It's control. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from fear, anticipation. I knew Caleb would feel the shift soon. Not from a headline. Not from an email blast. From silence. From the empty meetings. From the side glances in hallways. From the phone calls that stopped ringing. They say leadership is about being followed. But sometimes, it's about watching who walks away. And Caleb? He was about to find himself very alone. The next morning, I walked through Valeron's marble lobby again, not as Bella the ex-VP, but as Bella Reynolds, legal overseer of transition and incoming operational lead. Reception didn't recognize me. The new guard didn't even ask for my badge. I signed in under a new title, External Counsel, Strategic Transition Oversight. Technically true, legally surgical. By 10:15, I was seated across from Warren Thatcher, the same man who delivered my corporate execution with a voice calm as marble. He wasn't smiling now. He wasn't even speaking. Clause 47B is activated, I said flatly, placing the paperwork between us. Effective immediately. Warren didn't flinch, but his silence cracked, only barely. His hands folded tighter than his jaw. We both know Caleb's not equipped for the next quarter. I continued. The numbers prove it, and the clients agree. You think you can do better? He asked finally. No, I said. I know I already have. He didn't respond, just looked down. That was the thing about men like Warren. They didn't break. They folded, slowly, politely, quietly, and then they stepped aside. At 1:37 p.m., a company-wide memo was drafted. Effective immediately. Ms. Bella Reynolds will oversee all merger transition protocols and interdepartmental audits during the Corvanta acquisition phase. The signatures at the bottom weren't mine. They were Ethan's and Warren's. The old guard had just handed me the keys. Not because they wanted to. Because they had no choice. Later that day, I passed Caleb in the hallway. He was standing near the break room, sloppily pouring coffee and laughing too loudly at something no one else found funny. He didn't see me, and I didn't stop. That was the power of invisibility, when worn by choice. I didn't need to confront him. Not yet, because storms don't announce themselves. They arrive when the sky is quietest. I used to think reclaiming power would feel like triumph. Like standing at the top of a skyscraper in the wind, arms crossed, watching everything below tremble. But it didn't feel like that. It felt, still, heavy. Like holding a sword in one hand and a mirror in the other. Because what no one tells you about coming back stronger is this: you don't return as who you were. You return as someone who knows exactly how much they bled to get here. The first time I walked into my old office, now temporarily reassigned to me during the acquisition, everything felt the same. And yet, nothing was. The blinds were drawn, the air too cold, the chair too stiff. But the ghost of who I used to be was still there. That version of me who stayed late, cleaned up other people's messes, and smiled through boardroom silences. I sat for a moment, letting the silence settle around me like an old coat. Then I reached into the drawer and found a notepad. My handwriting, scrawled across the top. Q3. Loyalty does not equal visibility. I'd written that during a product meltdown when the exec team disappeared and I held the floor alone, speaking to clients and vendors while pretending we had a plan. The irony burned in my throat. By the third day, I'd seen the full landscape. The leadership team was a fractured shell, people playing defense, whispering, posturing. Some avoided eye contact, others greeted me like nothing had happened. But the worst were those who smiled too brightly. The ones who had voted for Caleb. Who had cheered my removal with the silence of cowards. And yet, not all of them. There was Daria, from compliance. She left me a handwritten note on my desk. I didn't know how to fight for you back then. I do now. Welcome home. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wasn't sure I deserved it. That afternoon, Ethan called a private strategy huddle. No more formalities. Just facts. The Corvanta acquisition was weeks from public announcement. Valeron was bleeding clients, and the board still thought they could pivot through PR and posturing. They're focused on control, Ethan said. You're focused on clarity. That's why you're going to win. I didn't respond. Not immediately. Because deep down, something had shifted in me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not even reclamation. This was realignment. They built Valeron with the wrong blueprint, power through nepotism, decisions by echo chamber. I was building something else now. A system that listened. Later that night, I found myself on a Zoom call with Naomi Park and Marcus Ellison. Two of the best minds we'd ever had. Both driven out under the pretense of cultural misalignment. Funny how culture always gets blamed when leadership runs scared. Marcus was still in Austin, consulting startups. Naomi looked tired, but sharp. You really going through with this? She asked. I'm already in it, I said, but I'm not rebuilding the old Valeron. Then what are you building? She asked. I looked at them through the screen. People who still believed. People who left not because they failed, but because they wouldn't play a broken game. And in that moment, the answer came clearer than ever. I'm building something where good people don't have to disappear just to survive. Naomi's eyes softened. That's the only kind of place I'd ever come back to. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Caleb requested a meeting. Just a 15-minute slot. No agenda. Just my name. And a time. 10:45 a.m. I almost cancelled it. Almost. But then I remembered something Ethan said that first day. Sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is let them speak. So I let him. He walked into the room like nothing had happened. Same expensive blazer. Same manufactured charm. He sat across from me. Hands folded. Confident. I think we got off on the wrong foot. He began. I know there's been friction. But we both want what's best for Valeron. I said nothing. I still believe there's a place for both of us. He continued. You have the legacy. The relationships. I have the energy. The innovation. The board may have made mistakes. But we don't have to repeat them. I leaned back, studying him. There it was. The smile of someone who thought charm could overwrite facts. Let me ask you something. I said quietly. When you took my job, did you hesitate, even for a second? He blinked. I didn't take anything. The board made a decision. No, I said, voice calm but sharp. You walked into a seat still warm from my presence and called it an opportunity. He started to reply. I held up a hand. And now you're watching the same foundation crack under your leadership. Clients leaving. Teams fracturing. No amount of polish can fix what you built on arrogance. He stiffened. I slid a folder across the table. Client retention reports. Missed deliverables. Audit flags. He didn't even open it. You're making a mistake, he muttered. I smiled faintly. No, Caleb, I'm correcting one. He left without another word. And for the first time, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Because power didn't come from beating him. It came from no longer needing to. That evening, I walked through the nearly empty office. It was quiet, still, but not hollow. Not anymore. Because now, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like alignment. And for the first time since I'd walked out of that boardroom months ago, heels clicking across tile. Breath caught in my chest. I finally felt something steady in me again. Not rage. Not sadness. Not vengeance. Purpose. Opportunity doesn't always arrive with a trumpet. Sometimes, it knocks softly, right when you've stopped expecting it. And sometimes, it comes wrapped in a name you didn't think you'd say again. 2 days after my meeting with Caleb, I received a secured file from Ethan. No message, no explanation, just a file marked VSYS, Silent Retention Pool, under consideration. I opened it and felt my breath catch. Inside was a list, not of people to remove, but of those we could still save. Names I hadn't heard in months, people who had been pushed out, buried under reorgs, or simply burned out from years of being overlooked. Marcus Ellison, former infrastructure director. Naomi Park, product systems strategist. Daria Lin, compliance. Elena Wu, UX design lead. All marked as low visibility, high potential. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a second chance. And I wasn't going to waste it. I sent 4 messages. Each short, each personal. They forgot what you built. I didn't. I want you back. By midnight, I had 3 replies. Naomi. You have my attention. Elena. I swore I was done. But if it's you, I'm listening. Marcus. Tell me when. Tell me where. Daria didn't reply. Not right away. But when she did, it came in the form of a signed NDA and a single-line email. Let's fix what they broke. I met with them individually. Not in the office. Not in some glass conference room that smelled like hollow promises. But in places that felt real. A diner in Midtown. A rooftop cafe in Soho. A basement co-working space with bad lighting and great coffee. No laptops. No decks. No buzzwords. Just conversations. What are we really building? Naomi asked me, over her 3rd espresso. I paused. Something that remembers people, I said. Something that rewards consistency, not noise. Elena leaned in. So, not Valeron. Not the Valeron we left. I said, but maybe the one we dreamed of when we stayed late. Fixing what other people broke. They didn't smile, but they nodded. And that was enough. By the end of the week, I had more than a team. I had a foundation. People who knew what the company had once meant. People who had bled quietly without asking for credit. People who didn't chase titles. They built things. And now? They were ready to build again. But we needed more than intention. We needed space. And power. And clarity. That's when Ethan called me in again. Same glass office. Same unreadable expression. You're assembling something, he said without preamble. I didn't deny it. I am. He studied me. Not just for the acquisition. For something else. I'm not rebuilding the old company. I replied. I'm building the next version of it. With the people who should have led it in the first place. Ethan nodded slowly, then slid another envelope across the table. Inside was a single document. Organizational charter. Draft for post-merger operations. At the bottom, beneath a placeholder line for CEO, was a blank space. I told the board we'd name a permanent CEO within 60 days. He said, if you want it, it's yours. I stared at the line. My name didn't tremble in my mind. It stood tall. I'll take it, I said, but on one condition. Name it. I want to restructure the board. His brow arched. I'm not asking for approval. I added, I'm informing you. We don't need a board of resumes and last names. We need people who actually show up. Ethan smiled, just slightly. Now you sound like a CEO. The next day, I called the first full team meeting. Not in the boardroom. In the Commons. Standing. No podium. No slides. Just eye contact. Just presence. Most of you know who I am. I began. Some of you think you know what I'm here to do. I paused, letting the silence stretch. But let me make this clear. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back because what we built together, once, mattered. And because I'm tired of watching companies forget the very people who kept the lights on. Eyes sharpened, postures straightened. I continued. This isn't about going back. It's about going forward, better, leaner, smarter, kinder. Someone in the back, Ivy, from support, spoke up. What if the people who hurt you are still here? I looked at her, then at the team. They're welcome to stay, I said softly, but they're not welcome to lead. That night, I sat alone in what used to be Caleb's office. The walls were too bare, the shelves too curated, but the chair? The chair was mine again. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small plaque I'd kept tucked away for years. Build quiet, led loud. I placed it gently on the desk. Then I turned to the window. The city lights stretched out endlessly. Reflections of choices yet to be made. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving something. I felt like I was steering it. Growth isn't always visible. Sometimes, it's as quiet as changing your tone in a room that once silenced you. Sometimes, it's as powerful as not needing to be loud anymore. I used to believe that leadership meant always being the smartest person in the room. But I've learned something more dangerous than arrogance, loneliness. The kind of loneliness that creeps in when you keep your thoughts too close. Your wounds too hidden, and your plans too quiet. That's who I was, for a long time. A silent tactician, a backstage warrior. And it worked, until it didn't. Until silence stopped being strategy and started becoming suffocation. The morning after accepting the permanent CEO role, I walked into the operations floor earlier than usual. No cameras, no assistants, no press release. Just me. I stopped by the support team's desk first. Ivy was pouring her first coffee. "Don't tell me the CEO makes her own rounds now," she joked, half awake. I smiled. "Only when the coffee's good." She blinked, surprised, then nodded, more from relief than amusement. That was the first moment I realized. People don't need to be impressed. They just need to be seen. Back upstairs, I launched the first internal review, not of revenue, not of deliverables, culture. We sent anonymous surveys. We opened confidential feedback loops. We asked the hardest question a company can ask. When did you stop feeling safe here? The answers weren't easy. When leadership changed and we weren't told why. When my manager took credit for my roadmap. When I realized doing the right thing wasn't rewarded, just tolerated. Some lines made me angry. Others, ashamed, because I'd been there when some of those cracks formed. And I hadn't spoken loudly enough to stop them. I scheduled 3 town halls over 2 weeks. One for leadership, one for mid-level teams, one for interns and junior staff. Same rules in all 3. No titles, no speaking in order, no defending bad choices. The first few minutes were tense. People whispered, shifted, stared at the floor, until one young engineer, Amira, raised her hand and said, "I used to love working here. Then I stopped trying, because no one above me knew I existed." It hit the room like thunder. No one interrupted, no one justified. We just listened. And for once, listening didn't feel like surrender. It felt like healing. That night, I stayed late. The office was dark except for my floor. I found myself reading old emails, congratulatory ones, celebratory ones, birthdays, promotions, product launches. So much noise, so little meaning. Then I came across a folder labeled, Personal Notes, pre-2020. I'd forgotten I'd saved them. Dozens of messages from team members. Thanking me, not for strategies, but for moments. "Thanks for staying with me when I missed that demo. You didn't need to fix that vendor problem yourself. But you did. That talk you gave during layoffs? I still think about it." None of these were KPIs. None were billable. But they were the only things that lasted. So I started something new. The Legacy Ledger. A simple internal initiative. Every employee was encouraged to submit the name of a peer who had helped them, not publicly. Not with grandeur, but quietly. We highlighted 5 names each month. No prizes, just recognition. The first month, over 300 entries came in. People remembered. People had always remembered. They just needed someone to say, "This matters." The real growth, though, came when I sat across from someone I hadn't planned to face so soon. Lena Montrose, former head of strategy during Caleb's reign. She asked to meet. I agreed. She walked in, composed, confident, still wearing that thin corporate polish. "Before you say anything," she began, "I know what you think of me." I stayed quiet. She continued, "I made decisions back then that favored security over integrity. I chose the board's approval over the team's trust." I tilted my head. "And now?" "Now I realize that kind of safety is a lie. And I'd like to earn a place in what you're building." There it was. Humility. Raw and unrehearsed. The old me might have said no on instinct. Closed the door before it reopened. But growth doesn't mean forgetting. It means knowing the difference between intentions and patterns. "I'll think about it," I said. Lena nodded. No begging, no excuses. That alone told me she'd changed. By month 2, something had shifted in the building. People talked louder, but not over each other. Teams gathered in corners to brainstorm, not to gossip. And the leadership calendar? It was filled with meetings led by other voices. Not just mine. Because I didn't need to dominate every room. I just needed to build one worth walking into. On a Friday evening, I stood alone by the 27th floor window. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Ethan had just sent a message. "You built something rare, Bella. Don't let them call it soft." I stared at the message for a long time. Then typed, "Soft never built empires, but it did make them worth keeping." And hit send. The boardroom hadn't changed. Same polished wood. Same stiff leather chairs. Same hollow scent of rehearsed decisions and filtered coffee. But this time, I had changed. And that made all the difference. It was my first official address as the permanent CEO of Valeron Systems. The title was real now. So was the weight. But I wasn't here to perform. No lights. No corporate video. No inflated bullet points on a slide. Just one agenda. One room. One voice. Mine. The team filed in slowly. Some familiar. Some new. Some with tension in their eyes. Others with quiet hope. And a few, those who once sat silently as I was dismissed, now looked at me with something I never expected: respect. Maybe even regret. I didn't need either. I just needed alignment. When the room settled, I stood, not behind the table, not above them, just with them. I'm not here to talk about the past. I began. A few brows lifted, some shoulders stiffened, but I continued. I'm here because I believe we can build something better than what we were. Not out of revenge, but out of vision. I paused, let the words breathe. I know what it's like to be overlooked, to be in the room and still feel invisible. And I know some of you, maybe all of you, have felt that too. There were nods, slight, almost imperceptible, but I also know something else. The quietest people often carry the most weight. The ones who don't interrupt, who don't take credit, who fix the unfixable when no one's watching. I let my gaze travel across the room, from the interns in the back to the seasoned directors up front. You deserve to be heard. And more than that, you deserve to be trusted. Then I did something no one expected. I sat down, right there, among them, and said, "This company isn't mine alone. It's ours. And from now on, the loudest voice in the room will never drown out the most valuable one." Silence. Then something shifted. A single hand lifted. It was Amira, the young engineer who once said no one knew she existed. "I used to think this company only cared about titles," she said, "but now, it feels like it might actually care about people." The room exhaled, collectively. Like tension had finally met truth. After the meeting, people didn't rush out. They lingered. Some approached quietly. Others just nodded. Maria, my former assistant, now executive liaison, handed me a note. I recognized the handwriting before I even read it. "You made it back, but more importantly, you brought us with you." I folded the note and placed it in my pocket. Because that was the legacy I wanted. Not power, not payback, but presence. In the weeks that followed, things moved fast, faster than I expected. The acquisition closed quietly. The media speculated, then moved on. But inside these walls, change rooted itself deeply. We restructured the board, inviting not just high-level investors, but department leads, clients, and even one rotating staff representative each quarter. We launched Project Ember, a full mentorship pipeline, pairing senior employees with juniors in reverse learning partnerships. We rewrote the handbook, not for compliance, but for culture. And every Friday, we posted a legacy highlight from someone in the company, not a star performer, but someone whose quiet work made the entire system better. In month 3, we highlighted Elena Wu, the UX designer who once rebuilt our feedback portal during a crisis without being asked. She cried when she read the post. Not because she needed the praise, but because no one had ever told her she mattered before. That's when I knew we weren't just building a company. We were building belonging. Ethan sent me a message one evening. "Feels like you've found your rhythm." I replied, "Feels like I stopped dancing to someone else's." One morning, months into the new structure, I passed by the break room. There was Caleb, sitting alone. He was still with the company, but in a junior advisory role now. Ethan had offered him one final chance to learn what leadership actually looked like. He didn't look up when I passed. And for the first time, I didn't need him to. Not out of coldness, but because I finally understood. Closure doesn't always come with confrontation. Sometimes it walks right past you, without flinching. That afternoon, I returned to my office. The windows were wide open. The skyline was drenched in gold. I picked up a framed photo from my desk, one from a team off-site 6 years ago. We were laughing, sweaty from an outdoor ropes course. No titles, no hierarchies, just people, connected. I stared at it for a while. Then I whispered, "We're still here," and smiled, because after all the silence, after all the closed doors, whispered betrayals, and polite dismissals, I hadn't just come back. I had risen, not from rage, but from resilience. And this time, they didn't get to decide how I showed up. I did. The greatest power doesn't come from speaking the loudest, it comes from knowing when to speak at all. For years, I believed that if I worked hard, kept my head down, and proved my worth quietly, the right people would notice. But when I was replaced, erased without warning, I learned something far more valuable. Your value isn't always visible to those in power. But that doesn't mean it disappears. It simply waits, until you remember it. Coming back wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming space. About choosing integrity over bitterness. Clarity over chaos. Leadership over noise. I learned that silence can be strategy, but it should never become self-erasure. And that the best kind of legacy isn't built in boardrooms. It's built in the small moments. The mentor call. The quiet fix. The hand on someone's shoulder that says, "You matter." The world may forget what you did. But the right people? They remember who you were when it counted. If you've ever been overlooked, passed up, or quietly pushed out, don't rush to prove your worth to the wrong audience. Instead, invest that energy in remembering who you are. Reconnect with those who saw your value when no one else did. Reflect on what you've built, the people you've lifted, the bridges you refused to burn. That's your foundation. Then, when the right door opens, don't hesitate. Walk in not with bitterness, but with vision. Lead not to prove them wrong, but to build something so undeniably right, it speaks for itself. And when it's your turn to lead, create a space where others don't have to recover from silence the way you did. Because healing isn't just about return. It's about creating the kind of place you needed, before anyone else believed you belonged. Thank you for choosing to listen to this story among thousands of stories out there. Like and subscribe to continue listening to the latest stories.